We're going to call the Board of Adjustment to order. First, let me announce all the decisions of the board are final. If there's anyone aggrieved by a decision of this board, they may appeal to circuit court within 15 days of the board's decision. Also, no permits or license can be issued until that 15-day appeal period is expired and no appeal has been filed. For information regarding the board's decision or an appeal circuit court, the Office of Land Use Administration will be your contact. As you come to the podium, I ask that you give us your name and address for the record. And at this time, if you got an electronic device, you turn it off or on silent so we don't have a disturbance during the meeting. That would also go for those of you on the board. There is a 5-minute limitation for speakers, usually 4 in favor of a request for variance and for an opposition, depending on the number of you that are here for an application. If there's more than 4 for one side or the other, pick your best 4 so that we don't have to worry about that during the meeting. And also, if you have any handouts or anything for the board, that you give those to staff so we can get those distributed before we start. Okay. All right. Well, we'll start with roll call. Mr. Davis. Here. Mr. Coleman. Here. Mr. Metcalf. Here. Mr. Burrows. Absent. Mr. Milling. Here. Mr. Golden. Here. And I'm William Guess. We have 6 of the 7 members here. It takes 5 to affirm a motion, either in favor or in opposition. And we have Mr. Anderson here as our legal advisor. And we will start in the order of the agenda, starting with the holdover, 6235, Ridley. And this is Child Daycare Association. Is that applicant here? Here. If you'll come down here, please, sir. Now, I realize last meeting we got to hear a lot of this, but for the name, for the record, I should say your name and address to start with.
209 South Washington Street.
Name?
Nana Nick's Daycare.
Okay. And as you know, this is recommended for denial, and you are afforded the opportunity to tell us why we ought to consider otherwise, what the hardship is and such. You just kind of give us a brief overview once again. Well,
there was a playhouse there in the beginning. We put the playhouse back. We did build it a little different than what it was before. And we want a storage area. Got a small little storage room on the back to be able to put the tricycles up, so where the people won't be taking them and putting them on the street. They can come through the fence or jump the fence.
And why was it that you or the applicant felt that they needed to build it in this specific spot, not
because it was where the other one was at.
Okay.
And there's other like swing sets and slides and all that in other areas. There was no other spot to it.
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sir, what was the process of your seeking approvals and permits for this?
Went to the building permit office. They said it fell under the square footage of the permitting for building. Went to the zoning office. They told me the only permit I needed was to go to the historical. Went and saw Ms. Page. Ms. Page gave me my historical permit. And then I got another letter saying that we needed to go back, that it would head to the CRC. Went to the CRC, and CRC said that we needed to come back to zoning to get a zoning variance.
You have any implementation to any of these things?
CRC has everything, Paige and them up there. I think we got a file with everything. She's got a file of all of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. During our last meeting, there was an individual that opposed your application based on line of sight.
Yes, sir.
And I requested that traffic engineering do an assessment, and we have that in our file, and I think each of us should have received that as part of our packet. If you'll see, okay. I'll just kind of refer to that. So can you summarize your assessment, please?
Yes, sir. I looked at the site standing as an individual, not trying to back out of a vehicle because of the conditions. I could not actually get onto the site with a car without moving some fences. So at approximately 10 feet from where their gate was on the property is where I started observing the line of sight. It's not a traditional way of looking at it, just because my teachings are for approaching an intersection, so you're driving forward and you're looking to the right and the left, and in case you have to kind of look at it both ways. Are you pulling, did they back into the driveway, or are they backing out of the driveway? And so the obstruction, it's a little tweaked, because if you're really backing out of the driveway, which in this case I believe they would, there's really no place to turn around. They'd be backing out of their driveway, they'd have to look over their shoulder through their car. So the pictures that I gave to you are just me standing there, not through a car or anything like that. So that can cause some additional obstructions of view. But it was about 10 feet from their front of their gate on their property where the playhouse was obstructing the view. And from that point forward towards the sidewalk and towards the street, it was not the house that was obstructing the view, it's the existing fence and the columns, if you are not tall enough to see over them, and then the shrubbery and the fence to the east looking north, or not, sorry, looking to the north. So you have the wall with the columns and the fence to the south, and the fence with the shrubbery to the north, that were all causing a line of sight, especially at any height of 5 or 6 feet, anything less than that, unless you could see through the fence to the south. Maybe you could see some things, or you could make out the tops of cars. But to the north, you really couldn't see anything unless you got a small view through the porch until you got all the way up to the sidewalk. So your car would be pretty far out if you were backing towards the street to back out. So I guess my summary is that it's not necessarily the location of the playhouse that's causing the line of sight, it's the existing conditions that are causing a line of sight that is there right now.
Okay, and that's to include the private property.
It's all of the obstructions are on private property. The only obstructions that are in the right-of-way are the trees, and they really aren't a line of sight at all.
Okay. Any questions for a representative from traffic? Okay. Anyone in the audience that's in favor of this application that wishes to speak at this time? Okay. Opposition? Yes, sir. If you'll come and give us your name and address, sir.
My name is Richard Browning, 201 South Washington. I'm at the adjoining property. First of all, comments I'd like to make about the line of sight questions. The woman that was speaking a minute ago, of course, is standing up taking these pictures. When you're backing out, you're sitting down in a car. That's a different elevation in terms of what you're looking for. There are also comments about the hedges to the north side. 95% of the time when we're pulling out of that driveway, we're heading back towards Government Street, not towards Canal. So under those circumstances, it's not a question of whether hedges in front of the property obstruct any view going towards the north. We're always looking towards the south, past the daycare, for oncoming traffic coming from Canal down Washington. That's, as I say, 95% of the time when we're coming out of the driveway, that's where we're headed. Also, in terms of where you might be standing when you take a picture, you got to realize you got 8 to 10 feet of car behind you if you're backing that car out. So in terms of where these pictures may have been taken from an individual standing, if you're backing out, you've got to allow for all the rest of your vehicle that's back behind you sticking out into Washington Avenue before you can pull out. Also, earlier I submitted by email a couple of pictures that I hope you have, and for two different reasons. One is a picture on Monroe Street, because there was a comment originally by the applicant that this wasn't even our main access to the property, that there was a side access from Monroe. Traffic engineering addressed that and said that's not true. And this picture shows that. This is a picture of the entire side of the property on Monroe Street showing no access whatsoever. All the access is directly off of Washington Avenue. The second picture that I sent is one that kind of shows an overview of our property as well as the daycare. And I submitted that for two reasons. One, there was a suggestion of simply kind of replacing one building with something very similar. This is a picture from Google Earth from a couple years ago showing the previous structure that was in place, and it is nothing like what has been put up now. This was simply a few posts with a little roof over it, as opposed to this now 10 by 12, 6'8" building which has been put there that's causing the problems. The second reason of submitted this picture is to show the options that are available behind this, move it further back from the street. There is plenty of room for this structure to be moved back so that it's in compliance and not in the way and causing problems for our trying to back out of the driveway and be able to safely enter Washington Avenue. The guidelines, I looked at those for the board, suggest that an application should not be, well, I just quoted it. No variance shall be granted where economics are a basis for the application. And I would suggest to you that's exactly what the applicant is doing here. They've built this incorrectly. They were issued notice of violation October 4, 2018, with a stop work order. They were issued a second notice of violation October 16, 2018, a third one October 30, 2018, and a fourth one December 14, 2018. Some of the pictures that I submitted with my original packet show just a framework of this. When I first noticed this building going up, that's the condition it was in. And that's when I called 911 to make some inquiries about whether this was in a proper location. The fact that they have continued to just ignore notice of violations and stop work orders and continue to build this building and to now say, well, it would be an inconvenience for us to have to relocate it, I do not think should be a proper consideration. And you see in their packet what they say is, well, if they have to relocate it, that would have more concrete out there in this play area than is permitted. That's an economic factor. Excuse me. Any other concrete that's already been poured can be broken up and moved as this is relocated further back away from the street where it's supposed to be by code and where it's presenting the problem for us as the adjoining neighbors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any question of the adjacent neighbor? All right, thank you. Anyone else in the audience that's in opposition to this request today? Okay, we have none for the record. Mr. Hoffman, what is the setback requirement for this?
As an accessory structure, the setback has to be behind the facade of the main building. So the facade is irregular for this building, but if you were to use this portion of it, it would have to be behind this line.
Okay. Any questions of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Comments? Mr. Metcalf?
Bert, the applicant states that he had gone through several different channels to obtain some sort of approvals for this, both from Page's office and CRC. I don't know if I believe all that, but is all that what approvals did he receive, if any?
Well, the CRC letter is in the packet, and he did go through historic office as well, and a certificate of appropriateness was issued, but I think there was a misunderstanding regarding the size of the structure and its location.
That's what I was told.
The CRC said that they really had two options, either to obtain a variance to the board or to move the structure to a compliant location, and that's why they're here before the board.
Okay, thank you.
And also, just an FYI, the building code does have a minimum square footage size for accessory structures, because no permit is required by building code. And that
And it falls under that?
For the building code, yes, but it still must comply with zoning ordinance requirements. So there sometimes is conflict between the two sets of regulations.
I got you. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, Bert, as far as the stop work orders that Mr. Browning referenced, do you know, can you confirm that those are accurate?
Again, copies of those are in your packet. The first one was issued, the notice of violation was issued on October 4th, as was a separate stop work order on October 4th. Next notice of violation was issued on October 16th. The next one was issued on October 30th, and the final one was issued on December 14th. And the CRC letter of decision was based upon meeting with the applicant on November 29th.
So the CRC recognized that the location was in violation, that the variance would be required?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just one clarification on that, Bert. So this CRC letter here, had construction begun before this?
Yes, the structure was under construction prior to the issuance of the first notice of violation on October 4th. And work continued until perhaps the October 30th notice of violation before they made notification to the CRC.
Then he went to CRC, which gave their decision on December 3rd, is to bring it into compliance or come here.
The November 29th meeting was when the decision was made, and then the letter confirming the decision was issued to the applicant. And then the notice of violation on December 14th was to notify the applicant, so there was no confusion as to what would be required.
And that was the last one?
Yes.
And construction continued?
No, construction did stop
They did.
by the time they had met with the CRC.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is there a site plan that shows the structure behind the front facade, or facade, I should say, of the accessory structure?
One has not been provided, and we did not prepare one.
Okay. All right,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
I've got a question for Mr. Browning.
if you'll come to the podium, sir. Yes, sir.
With regards to the comment earlier about what the current setback would be for it to be in compliance, with your concern about the line of sight, if there was a compromise so that they had to move it, but maybe not back as far as behind the facade of the main building, would that alleviate your concerns with line of sight? And my question, I guess, is because of the other equipment and things they have back there and trying to, somewhat minimize maybe the disruption.
I guess without knowing how far we're talking, I don't really know how to answer the question. I guess any movement backwards would obviously be an improvement. But I mean, I guess I'm a little bit lost about how to answer the question without really knowing how far back you're talking. I would think that probably at least 6 to 8 feet back from where it is right now is probably what it would take for it to not be the problem that it is now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? I got a question for them again. If you'll come to the podium one last time. From the pictures, it appears that the slab is actually larger than the actual structure, like you've got like a...
Yeah, it's a tricycle path around it.
How wide, how much wider is that than the actual structure?
It's 3.5 feet.
How much?
3.5 feet on the side to the towards the river. Be 3.5 feet.
Okay.
Okay. To answer something that he said,
Let me ask, Mr. Metcalf, do you have any further questions for the applicant? No,
Okay.
sir. Okay, and I see Mr. Milling's line of thought here, if it was to be moved back some without, and the reason why I had a question about the slab was whether or not that could be considered part of the, if he added to that slab, moved it back another 5 feet, 6 feet, or whatever, to accommodate the adjacent number, I think that would maybe less disruption to the site and less of a hardship to the applicant. Okay, Chair, entertain a motion.
yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, let me just point out that under the Downtown Development District regulations in a T4 district, which is this location, they would be able to add, for the main building, there is no front setback required. There is maximum setback limitation, however, for a new main building. So either they could add on to the existing building and bring it all the way up to the Washington Avenue property line, or if the site were redeveloped, they could build all the way up to the Washington Avenue property line. And wherever that facade location is, then would set where an accessory structure could be placed on that property. So in theory, if the facade were all the way up by the front property line continuously, then where the shed is located would appear to be in compliance with that facade. So the question comes down to if the recessed portion of the facade that you see on the drawing is the part that must be met with in terms of compliance here, or if this line is the line that might actually be the one that would apply.
Well, the reason for my original question about the setback is normally 8 feet from a side yard, or
Right. Well,
this is a little different.
the downtown regulations are very different in that you're allowed to have no side yard setback subject to compliance with building code, which might require a fire-rated wall from the side and from the rear yard. But for a front yard, there is a 0-foot minimum setback for the main building, and then a 12-foot maximum setback for the main buildings. And that's to try and keep the main building near the street. And then for an outbuilding, it just says to the rear of the facade. And, you know, this building has a facade that has varying distances from the Washington Avenue right-of-way.
Okay.
So who makes that determination?
Staff could have, but they didn't, so it's up to y'all.
I think staff maybe made the determination that the further back facade was the applicable facade, and that's why it was recommended that they come to the Board of Adjustment.
But, you know, the ordinance doesn't say, it just says the facade, which is, I guess, in this particular section, confusing.
Well, based on the drawing, it appears that one of the facades, like the center one, is closer to Washington Avenue than,
There's actually two of them. You got one on the south end and then one in the middle, both up to the, just a couple feet off. Then you got the two that are recessed. So.
okay. Well, we have traffic engineers' review of the line of sight. The tree and then the columns appear to be more of an issue than the structure. However, there was work order, a stop work order request, citations multiple times that I question whether or not at that point they should have stopped.
Well, that was to go to the CRC, not to get a variance.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, once again, Chair, entertain a motion. Do I run out and make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the building as it sits.
Okay, any conditions? Gutters, downspouts, anything?
I don't think there's a drainage issue now.
Okay, I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, we have 5 in support and 1 in opposition. Motion carries. I'm sorry? Did you? Let's do a call. Mr. Metcalf? In favor of the motion or in opposition? Opposition. Okay. Mr. Coleman? Favor?
In favor.
Opposition. Okay, motion fails. We had 4 in favor and 2 in opposition. The variance was denied, sir. Okay, we're going to go to the next application. This is 6240. Application for 72 Jordan Lane. Okay, your name and address, sir?
Kai Manke, 72 Jordan Lane.
Okay, and your application's been recommended for denial as well. Will you tell us why we ought to consider otherwise?
We have built a structure that is currently used as a mother-in-law suite with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a storage room. And we're intending to have my mother over here for longer term, so we want to build a kitchen. We know that if you want to put a stove in there, I think it needs a variance adjustment, and that's why we put in the application.
Okay, so based on staff's report, a few years back, there was a affidavit signed that this would only be for visitors.
Correct.
And then something since changed, I understand.
Yeah, that's a familiar change in family situation compared to 6 years ago. So it's
Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant?
Yeah, I do. Just, could you
Mr. Milling?
maybe give a little bit more detail on that? So there was an affidavit that was signed in order to get the approval to build it. So what's changed since then to now negate that affidavit?
well, actually, my mother, she has we don't want her to go into retirement home, but to live with us. She's still active enough. She comes and wants to live with us. She wants to have her own kitchen, not only a microwave. So actually, that's the change in compared to 6 years ago.
Okay, any further questions? Bert, with some of the new standards, would any of the new zoning map district standards apply to this type setting?
Under the proposed zoning ordinance, we are trying to accommodate accessory dwelling units, which would allow full use, including cooking facilities in those units. But as currently stands under the current zoning ordinance, and there's actually another case on the agenda today as well, we only allow an accessory structure like this on a property if there are no cooking facilities in terms of a stove or oven and no connections for those. You can have a microwave, you can have a hot plate and a refrigerator, but no actual stove and range connections. So this is how this particular one was permitted, and this is why they have to come before the board today.
Okay. All right. Anyone else in favor of the application wish to speak at this time? Anyone in opposition to the application? All right, we have none for the record. And it seems like over the course of several years, we've had these periodically come up. I think last year we had one somewhere off of Hillcrest, maybe, in Vernus, or one of the Maryknoll, one of those areas, that seems like. Okay, discussion of the board.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion to approve with a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes to deny, so the motion carries. All right, good luck to you. Thank you. All right, we're on application 6241, Stimson. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Your name and address, please.
Lucy Barr, and I'm the designer for the 4358 Stein Avenue.
Okay, and as the applicant's representative, have they seen the staff's recommendation?
Yes.
And are they in agreement that the staff's recommendation is to approve, subject to all other requirements, the setback, site coverage will be in character with the neighborhood, will not be a hardship, special conditions do not exist such a way that literal enforcement of this will result in us under hardship as the site was developed without the requirement for a variance. In the spirit of the chapter will be observed, substantial justice shall be done in the surrounding neighborhood. By granting the variances, it will not change the character of the neighborhood. There is a condition that gutters and downspouts on any portion of the addition 5 feet or fewer within the property line. So they're in agreement with that. Okay. Any questions of the board for the applicant's representative? Okay. As a matter of protocol, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak in favor or opposition to this application? Okay, we have none. All right, well, thank you. Chair, entertain a motion.
Approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve subject to the staff's
Second. Yes, second.
requirements and conditions.
Right.
Do I have a second?
That was fine.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Good luck to y'all. All right, application 6242. This is 4401 Birchwood Drive East. And your name and address for the record, ma'am?
Paula Gushard, 4401 East Birchwood Drive, Mobile.
Okay, and your application is recommended for denial. Will you tell us why we ought to consider otherwise?
I put everything into this home. I was given the permits for a automatic dwelling date. The permit states on it, it is a mobile home. And it wouldn't have been moved onto the property if the permit wouldn't have been issued and stated right on there that it is a mobile home. It is there because I moved from Huntsville. I'd sold my home there because my children wanted to keep an eye on me due to me failing health. They shouldn't have issued the permit if they wanted to rescind on it. They said the reason they rescinded was because it didn't meet HUD standards, and it does. It's got the HUD sticker on it. Then they said it's because it's on a metal frame. Mobile homes are moved on metal frame. The home is a tiny home. It's 432 square feet. It's in my daughter's backyard behind a fence. I did everything they asked, took the stove out and everything. It's on the pad that's supposed to be on, the legal pad, the dirt pad. Very well tied down.
Okay.
I feel like if it wasn't supposed to be there, they issued it in the first place because they knew it was a mobile home.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? You want to see the file? Oh, that's right.
I've got my permit with me that states on it it's a modular mobile home.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could we see that, please?
If you'll just give us a second as we look through this. Here's the file. Okay. Can you share that with everyone? While we're looking at this, is there any questions of the board? All right, I'll tell you what, if you'll have a seat for a second.
Okay.
Is there anyone in favor of this application? Yes, sir, if you'll come and give your statement. Your name and address, sir.
Yeah, I'm with Clayton Homes. My name is Steve Schuer. We're the ones that worked with the site plan and Ms. Gushard, getting everything
Your
put
name and
through.
address.
My name and address, Steve Schuer, 13033 Tanner Williams Road, Mobile.
Sorry to interrupt you, but.
Yeah, you're all right. I actually didn't know if you wanted Clayton's or mine. But anyway, this home, if there's anything that we can do to, figure this thing out, we're more than willing to help. We tried to go through the process correctly, as you can see, getting the building permit and everything. The home is to HUD standards. It has been inspected by the state of Alabama. It is a hurricane wind zone 2. Brought the data sheet in on it, if anybody'd like to see that shows everything on there. If there's anything we can do with possible positioning of this home or something like that, we're more than willing to help.
There you go. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
How is sanitary hooked up to this?
Nothing is connected to it right now. It was going out to the city.
Okay, so was work stopped?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Excuse me?
I don't do that with you guys. I've run into that before. The minute we have a problem, we just stop with everything.
Okay.
So.
And you said something about you took out the stove? And what's the purpose of that?
If you'll come back to the podium, so Mr. Metcalf can ask you questions as well.
Yeah, I was informed that it was not allowed to have a stove and oven in it, so I did read
The
that.
same situation that we
Yeah.
just heard? Okay.
So,
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah.
So this would have its own independent power and utilities? Is that the
Yes.
way it was being set up?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it would be
it would not be running off the structure that's existing, no.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So for this to be an ancillary structure, normally it would not have its own separate power and water and utilities.
That's correct.
So then it's really two residents on one lot is,
Except for the fact that when it was presented, she started the permitting process at the permitting office. She brought the information over to the planning office to review. It's our understanding that it was going to be a modular home, which is a structure that is built according to the International Building Code standards and then certified by the state of Alabama. And we informed her that she could not have the cooking facility in it, so that's why the structure no longer has the stove in it. Planning did not realize that it was a mobile home or manufactured home structure until the electrical inspector went out to the site and found a pole there and observed the structure in place. And then when we sent our inspector out, we found that it had the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development plate on the structure, which means that it is what is commonly known as a mobile home versus a modular home.
right.
Sir, could I?
Just a second.
This says manufactured modular building, manufactured home installed. It doesn't say
Yeah, it reads on this permit as it's a modular manufactured building.
And that's the way that the permitting office has set up their permits, so that a manufactured home, which is commonly known as a mobile home that has a steel frame structure underneath it that remains attached to it once it is set in place, versus a modular home which can be set onto a standard foundation and is built to the International Building Code requirement versus the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requirement that applies to a mobile home.
Okay. I think you were going to make a statement. If you'll come back. So explain how this was,
Well, when we spoke to the city on this, Ms. Gashard also, we were very clear that this was a manufactured, which is HUD coded. You're absolutely right. But, you know, if you get into the definitions, a mobile home is anything before 1976, and then they switched over to manufactured. But the building permit they issued was okaying a manufactured home coming in there. And we talked specifically about this before we did it.
so is this going to be on any kind of foundation at all, or is it going to remain on the?
It's on the state-required dirt pad with ABS, wind zone 2 tie-downs, the whole bit, yeah.
So it'd have wind screening underneath?
I mean, I can get an FHA foundation letter on this just by changing the skirting, is how, you know, a certified FHA foundation engineered report letter.
Okay.
That's how close it is to being a full foundation, meeting under HUD guidelines.
You'll have to speak in the microphone, Mr. Metcalf.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Bert, I'm just curious, and you may not know since this is building, but the way this was written, y'all just looked at it. Look at it again.
So the difference, as you were stating, is to put an actual foundation around it would not be much more than...
You would just have, you'd have to put a FHA-approved K-Rock skirting around it, or if she wanted to do something different, I know funds are limited for, but if she wanted to do something different, like a brick skirting or something like that, that would pick up a full FHA pre-1996 cert.
Okay.
Same thing we issue for all FHA and VA loans.
Okay.
So Bert, I'm just curious, the way that's written, do you think that, would it have been written any differently had it been more clear to the permitting office that it was, you know, because we're talking about semantics here almost, you know, that it's a mobile type home, you know, that came in on wheels with the steel structure. Would there be any different in the way that permit was issued, you think?
I'm not sure how it would have been written differently on the permit. I know that the planner spoke with the applicant at the counter to try and clarify whether or not it was a manufactured, i.e. mobile home, versus a modular home built to International Building Code standards. And it was our understanding when we approved the permit that it would be a modular home.
Okay, do we know who pulled the permit? Did y'all do it or did the owner?
Ms. Gashard did.
And so, again, planning found out through the electrical inspection that there was a manufactured house placed on the property. We issued a stop work order for this permit, essentially.
Okay, would a ancillary building be, that's allowed in R1 as long as it doesn't have the cooking facilities?
As with the previous application, we would allow a modular or stick-built on-site structure if it did not have the cooking facility in it, yes.
Okay.
Subject to setbacks.
So are we talking about the distinction between how it's tied down, maybe, or if it were sitting on a slab? You don't think so?
It's how it is built, to what standard it is built, and the fact that the zoning ordinance specifically states that if you have a manufactured / mobile home, you have to have planning approval in a single-family residential district as one dwelling unit on one site. And in this case, it's as a secondary structure in a residential district.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
So in reference to the previous, one of the earlier applications, the applicant's taken out the stove and any of the cooking facilities. So it's now just an ancillary structure. Is that the way it's considered?
Well, it is similar to the previous application. When it was approved, they were informed of, we will allow a structure subject to there not being a cooking facility located in it, and she has done that to make it as compliant as possible in that respect. And that's the basis by which we issued that permit.
Okay, so the question is, now that it's just an ancillary structure, do we have to consider it for the variance?
Since it is a mobile home manufactured structure, that is the purpose why she is here today.
So whether it's a building brought in on a skid and put in within the property line versus the mobile home aspect, it's on wheels, is the difference as it relates to the application of the day.
Essentially, yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we proceed? All right. Those of you in opposition, how many of you are in opposition? Okay. 4 of you. Pick your best 4. Once I stated before. If you'll come to the podium and give us your name and address and a statement. And for the record, we have several individuals that have sent in comment statements that were provided to us for the board to look at. All right, your name and address.
Teresa Burton. I'm here to speak on behalf of my father, Eugene Miller, of 4369 East Birchwood Drive. He owns the home next door to the property in question, and due to an illness, he's not able to attend today himself. He purchased this home more than 50 years ago. This has always been a single-family R1 zoned neighborhood, and he feels this variance will have a negative impact on his property's value as well as changing the aesthetics of the neighborhood. While we all feel the plight of this individual, lack of planning and not following existing zoning regulations should not penalize those around the property. Growing up, I personally spent a good deal of time in the property at question of 4401 Birchwood Drive. This is a large home, probably one of the largest in the neighborhood, 5-bedroom, 3-bath house. It already has an in-ground pool, as you could see on the site plan you saw, a large accessory structure already there. I don't feel as though that is a proper rendition of where her mobile home is. It goes all the way up to the rear corner of the actual dwelling, just barely fits behind the fencing. No offense, but it's not in keeping with anything in that neighborhood. It's an eyesore. It's clearly stated in regulations the prohibiting of mobile homes in these areas, so I don't understand why they thought this would be allowed. An understanding on their end should not constitute a penalty for our neighbors. If allowed, that is exactly what it is doing to surrounding homes. It's a penalty. Homeowners in this neighborhood purchased with peace of mind, knowing that they were in a zoned area with an expectation of a certain quality of life. No one in this neighborhood ever envisioned having to fight to keep mobile homes from entering the community. I'm sure everyone here today feels for the individual who's requesting this variance. However, Paula Gashard is not even a property owner in this community. This variance sets a precedent for the entire area, and it is not in the best interest of the neighborhood and places property values at risk. Please preserve the character of the neighborhood and vote no on this variance request. As an aside, it is a mobile home. Walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck. There's a mobile home community less than 1.2 miles away, just outside the entrance of this neighborhood. I feel that that's where they should seek residents for this.
Okay. Any questions? All right, next individual. As you each come to the podium, if you kind of anything new to add to
Yes,
the
sir.
statement.
Good afternoon. My name is John Affenbach. I live at 4351 East Birchwood Drive, which is 8 or 9 houses down at the other end of the street. I've been there over 35 years. I, too, moved out there under the knowledge that the neighborhood would hold its value. That's an old, well-established neighborhood. In the 35 years I've been there, we have never had a situation like this in that neighborhood. Never. And there are over 500 homes there. The city, as I understand it, the city's ordinance strictly prohibits this. And I don't see why we're even here today, but I understand y'all's role. I would say that your site plan is a little bit off. I provided, each of you I think has a picture. It's plainly visible from the street. It's a detriment to everyone's property values. And I just don't see how it could be allowed. It's obviously against the city regulations.
Okay, any questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, next, please.
Good afternoon. David Hughes. I've been there since '75.
Your address?
4353 East Birchwood Drive. Everything the two speakers ahead of me spoke, I couldn't agree with more. I understand the hardship. We all got hardships. This is not a place for a mobile home. First question, if you allow it, and she has moved the stove, oven, or whatever, what's to keep her from coming back if this is allowed to put it back there? Y'all wouldn't know it. We wouldn't know it. You wanted some different perspective. One other thing I'd like to ask. This letter asks people within 300 feet. This letter on the Board of Zoning Adjustment. I'd like to know from y'all why more people in the neighborhood was not informed of this at least 3 to 4 blocks that would have an effect on their future property value. Because that's what this is all about, sir. In the future, we may want to turn property over to our children. We might want to sell it. And if we start this in this neighborhood, and then people come up and said, we ain't going to move in a mobile home park. This is single-family residence, sir. But I would like to find out why more people couldn't got information on this and not just within 300 feet of this variance.
I'll defer to.
Code only requires 300.
Well,
That's what the law says.
okay, I appreciate your time. One other thing, this is a mobile home that I seen it when it came down the street. It took up all of East Birchwood, blocking traffic if somebody would have wanted to try to get by. And as that thing sits there now, as she said, it's an eyesore. Thank y'all.
All right, thank you. All right, one last person, please.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Your name and address.
Dawn Bratcher. I live at 1555 Hillendale Drive. I live at a street that, I live at one end and Hillendale runs into Birchwood, and she's on the corner. Crestview Community Action Group is a group that we have. I'm the treasurer of it. And we work really hard to keep our neighborhood safe and clean. And we have cameras throughout the neighborhood, and we catch anybody who's doing mischief. And we, as a community, pay for these cameras. And the police, Mobile Police Department, considers us one of the safest neighborhoods in Mobile. Out of 400 and something communities in Mobile, we rank in the 20s. We want to keep it that way. And we don't want this to set a precedent. We feel for Ms. Gouchard, but we don't want this to set a precedent. We work really hard to keep our neighborhood the way it is. My husband and I moved in about 1.5 years ago, and we moved here for that reason. We want to keep our property values up, and if mobile homes start moving in for whatever reason, it's going to go down. You wouldn't want it in your neighborhood. We don't want it in ours.
You said you're part of your homeowner association?
It's not a homeowners association. It's an action group, correct.
Action group. Do you know, based on you're a recent homeowner in the neighborhood, are there covenants that restrict ancillary buildings?
No, but there are about mobile homes.
No, I'm just asking, just in general. I'm just
No.
curious. Okay.
No.
Okay. Any questions of the board for any of the individuals? All right. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. All right. Staff, I'll go back to staff's recommendation first. Staff recommends the following fact for denial: contrary to public interest, special conditions and site unusual site constraints do not exist, that such a little enforcement of the provisions of the chapter result in unnecessary hardship. An accessory dwelling unit could be built without the need for a variance. The spirit of the chapter should not be observed, substantial justice not done to the surrounding area by granting the variance. Okay, based on that, Chair entertain a motion? Yes.
Motion to deny based on the recommendations from staff.
Okay, I have a motion to deny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, thank you. I'll give you a minute to exit while we move to the next application. Are you the
I'm actually the president of the association. I did have it since it's been denied. She can file an appeal to
Circuit Court?
Okay, so
15 days. Staff will kind of help clear that for you.
okay, how long does she have to remove that property? 15 days. If this was an error on the permitting office, would they be liable for helping move the property? I don't know if the city would be okay. I'm trying to make both parties happy because I'm representing everybody in the neighborhood. And I don't want her to be stuck, but I'm trying to see what the options are.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, application 6243. 5603 Street Apartments. Have we had any communications with this applicant?
I believe we sent them a notice of the letter of decision and the determination. I believe it was Jerry Bird's office that submitted it, and they were notified of the decision. So it's recommended for approval,
Right.
mostly, not completely for approval, however.
Well, it's not like Mr. Byrd to miss an opportunity to actually potentially get a variance on behalf of his applicant or his client.
This is true.
All right. Well, that and the fact that our date for this meeting is a little different than usual. I usually thrown off his schedule. Chair, entertain a motion to hold it over for 30 days.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Have a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion's approved. Any other business?
At the previous meeting, I believe the board had asked about the status of the M&W welding supply on the North Service Road. I had talked to the zoning tech, and he informed me that this was still in environmental court, that there had been some problems getting a representative on their side to appear in court, and that they had finally found someone to appear, an attorney, that they were allegedly going to make another application to the board to try and get the sign approved, but we have not received an application, and I believe there's another court appearance this month. So,
What about Hub City?
Hub City Towing, I think that they
Hub
have
City Towing, there's the rims and all.
Gulf Coast Wheels and Hubcaps.
Gulf Coast
They come into compliance. So they have done all the renovation work on the inside of the building. They've torn down anything that encroached, and they did put in the minimum amount of landscaping that was required. So they came into compliance.
Okay.
It took a long time.
Any other business? Okay. Motion to adjourn? Oh. Have a good day, everyone.